The morning air is cool on your hands and the ink smells faintly metallic beside the open ledger. In 1920s Lisbon, near the Tagus riverfront, you sit in the small-scale house where carts wait their turn. Outside the window, a wooden wheel creaks onto the weighbridge, and the beam settles with a slow, familiar tremble. Your work is not to hurry the city, but to copy it carefully. Gross weight, tar weight, net weight, cart number, merchant name, fee, and time all pass through your pen. There are stamped tickets, blotting sand, brass weights, and a wall clock that makes the morning feel measured. Most entries are ordinary enough to disappear into totals by dusk, but one load of olive oil barrels is lighter than its dock note claims, by just enough to notice. So you mark the difference quietly in the margin, and the forgotten work of a Lisbon-scale house scribe begins to come into view. The weigher outside does not call it a mistake at first. He only lifts his hand from the scale lever, looks once toward your window, and waits for you to read the dock note again. You lower your eyes to the paper, where the merchant's clerk has written the expected weight in a neat, confident hand. The ink on that note is darker than yours, almost blue-black, and the number sits there with the calmness of something already believed. But the beam outside has settled lower than it should, and the brass poise has stopped at a different mark. You dip your pen again, slowly, because a wet nib can turn a small correction into an ugly blot. Then you write the platform weight beside the claimed weight, and beside that, in the margin, you place a small difference. It is not an accusation, it is only a number, written where a number belongs. Still, the morning line feels it. The carter with the olive oil turns on the boards, and his boots make a hollow sound above the scale pit. Behind him, a flour cart waits with a canvas cover tied over pale sacks, and beyond that, a man with cork bales leans against his mule. The city is not stopped, not truly. It is only held for a few quiet minutes by your handwriting. You slide the stamped ticket halfway under the ledger, not hidden, but not released. The weigher sees the motion through the open window, and he nods once. He steps back onto the platform, bends near the edge, and checks that both wheels sit squarely on the iron plate. The cart horse lowers its head, and the harness rings softly against the wooden shaft. Inside, you can hear the wall clock, the street, and the faint lap of river water beyond the warehouses. The weigher resets the beam, the brass poise travels along its notched bar, pauses, is nudged, and then rests again at the same mark as before. The load is still light, not very light. Not enough for shouting, just enough for the ledger to resist being closed. You turn the dock note over, as if the back of the paper might explain the missing kilograms. There is only a smudge from someone's thumb, a faint trace of rope fiber, and the smell of damp paper carried from the key. The olive oil barrels themselves look ordinary through the window. They are round, dark, and banded with iron, each one marked in chalk with the merchant's initials. A load like this might pass the scale house any market morning, coming from a warehouse near the river, going toward a shop, a broker, or a further cart. Lisbon has many such mornings. The river brings goods in, the hills carry them upward. The scale house sits between movement and account. Your place is small, but the city leans through it in measured portions. You look at the ledger line again. The columns are ruled by hand, not printed, because the old book has served through many hands before yours. The headings are simple: cart number, name, commodity, gross, tare, net, fee, time, remarks. The remarks column is narrow, as if the office hoped remarks would be rare. This morning, the narrow space has already become too small. You choose not to scratch out the entry, because scratching draws more attention than patience. Instead, you place a fine diagonal mark beside the line, the kind used when something must be returned to later. Then you turn to the weigher and speak through the window in a low voice. You ask him to have the carter remain to one side, after the next cart is weighed. It is a small decision. It keeps the queue moving, but it also keeps the ticket in your custody. The carter hears enough to understand that his paper is not finished. He mutters to the horse, not to you, and guides the olive oil cart off the platform toward the wall. The boards creak again as the wheels leave the iron plate. The beam rises, relieved of its weight. The flour cart rolls forward. The day resumes, but not exactly as before. You take a fresh ticket from the stack, press the municipal stamp into the corner, and feel the faint ridge of the seal beneath your thumb. The ticket paper is cheap, a little fibrous, and the ink spreads if the nib is too wet. You've learned to write the first letter lightly. Too much pressure at the start of a merchant's name can thicken the line and make the copy look careless. The flour merchant is known to the scale house. His carts come from mills along the working edges of the city, where dust settles in sleeves and hair. The sacks are marked with flour grades, though after a morning on the road, the markings look soft and pale. The weigher reads the gross weight aloud. You repeat it inwardly before writing it down, because the mind can misplace a digit while the hand is moving. Gross weight is the whole burden. Cart, sacks, ropes, boards, dust, and the goods themselves. The buyer does not pay for all of that. So beneath gross weight, the ledger requires tare. Tare is the weight of the container, the vehicle, the wrapping, the barrel, the crate, the sack, or anything that must be subtracted before trade becomes fair. It is a quiet idea. Take away what is not the goods, leave what is. In practice, it is rarely as smooth as the arithmetic. A wooden cart gains weight after rain. A repaired wheel changes a known figure. A barrel marked empty may still hold residue in its seams. A sack with damp flour dust can weigh more than the same sack dried in the sun. The scribe's work is to let these small conditions pass through ink without turning them into confusion. You ask for the flour cart's tare ticket. The carter hands over a folded slip from the previous week. Its corners are soft from being kept in a waistcoat pocket. The number is familiar. You have copied it before. Still, after the olive oil difference, familiarity feels less like proof and more like a habit wearing a good coat. You write the gross weight first, then you pause over the tare column. The carter sees the pause and says the cart is unchanged. He says it quietly, almost helpfully. You do not doubt him. You only look at the old slip, then at the cart number painted on the side rail, then at the ledger from 3 mornings before. The number matches. The tare does not. The difference is small, but it is present. You keep your face still. This is one of the gentle skills of an office near commerce. A raised eyebrow can move faster than a rumour. You turn 2 pages back in the ledger and find the same cart, same owner, same general route. The tare there is lighter by a little, not enough to change the world. Enough to change the fee. You place the old slip beside the olive oil dock note, not touching, but close enough that the desk begins to form its own small argument. Outside, the flour cart waits, and the mule flicks one ear. You ask the weigher whether the cart has been checked empty since its repair. The weigher wipes his hand on his coat and looks at the rear wheel. He notices a newer spoke, pale against the older wood. The carter says the repair was done after a broken rim on the road to Tare. He says the empty weight was copied from the old ticket because the load was urgent. There is no shame in his voice, only the plain tone of someone describing how work gets done when everyone is tired and the morning is full. You understand it. The scale house exists because ordinary shortcuts can become official figures if no one slows them down. So you do not refuse the cart. You write the gross. You copy the presented tare, but in the remarks column you add, tare from old ticket, recheck requested. The words are small. They fit only because you write with care. Then you calculate the net weight and the fee according to the figure provided, but you leave the ticket unstamped for final clearance. The carter looks at you through the window. His expression is not angry. It is more like the look of a man who has found a stone in his shoe and must walk anyway. You tell him the office will finish the ticket after the empty cart returns. He nods because he has sacks to deliver, and flour does not wait for perfect paperwork. The cork bales come next. They smell faintly of bark, dust, and the warm dryness of inland yards, even though the river air is cool. Cork was one of Portugal's patient trades, harvested from trees that continued living after their bark was taken. By the time it reached a scale house in Lisbon, it had already passed through many hands: cutters, stackers, carters, warehousemen, clerks, brokers. Each hand had done a simple thing. Together, they made a chain long enough to reach your desk. You record the cart number, you record the merchant name. The weigher calls out the gross figure. You write it down, sand the line, and tap the extra grains back toward the dish. Blotting sand is quieter than blotting paper. It makes a small, dry whisper across the ink. Some scribes prefer a rocker blotter with a curved wooden back. This office keeps sand because it is cheap, clean enough, and easy to pour into a little tin at the desk corner. The cork cart presents no immediate problem. Its Tare ticket is recent. The cart body is narrow, and the bales are roped high but evenly. The beam settles cleanly. For a few minutes, the day feels ordinary again. This is how routine repairs itself. One line follows another. One ticket leaves the desk. One cart exits by the side lane toward the city streets. Then the man with the ceramic crates arrives, and the quiet pattern shifts once more. The crates are filled with tiles, stacked in straw, bound for a shop where builders come to count patterns by hand. The carter brings an old Tare slip, folded so many times the crease has nearly split. You unfold it gently. The paper gives a small dry crackle. The Tare was written months ago, in another hand, with ink that has faded brown. The cart number is partly rubbed, but it appears to be the same. You ask whether the crates are new. The carter says the crates belong to the merchant and are reused. He says the empty crates are never weighed because they are always the same. Always the same. It is a comforting phrase. It is also one of the phrases that ledgers must test. You compare the old Tare to a tile load from the previous month. The net weight seems too round. Not wrong, perhaps, only too convenient. You begin to feel the morning gathering in layers. The olive oil is light against its note. The flour cart has a copied Tare after repair. The ceramic crates carry an old number through a new load. None of it feels like deceit by itself. Together, it feels like a street where everyone has walked the same path so often that they no longer see the uneven stones. You decide to begin a pencil list. It is not official. It is not even neat at first. You pull a scrap of wrapping paper from beneath the ticket stack and smooth it with the side of your hand. Pencil is useful because it can stand beside ink without pretending to be final. You write the date, the morning, scale house near the river, then you add cart numbers, presented Tare, last recorded Tare, and a short note on condition. Olive oil dock note discrepancy. Flour cart repaired wheel. Ceramic crates old Tare. You do not know yet what the list will become. For now it is only a way to keep the day from slipping into separate small puzzles. The wall clock moves toward mid-morning. Its pendulum is hidden behind a cloudy glass door, but you can hear its steady inward work. Outside, the sun begins to reach the upper parts of the buildings, leaving the street below in a cool strip of shade. Men speak in low voices while they wait. A cart horse breathes steam that fades quickly. A boy brings coffee in small cups from a nearby shop, and the smell enters through the window with sugar, chicory, and warm milk. You take yours late. It sits near the ink bottle until the surface cools, and a thin ring forms inside the cup. The wearer comes to the window between carts and rests his fingers on the sill. There is iron dust under his nails. He asks whether you are making a separate account. You say it is only a comparison. He looks at the scrap, then at the line of carts. He is a practical man. His work is in beams, weights, levers, and the flat truth of whether a wheel is properly on the platform. But he also knows that the scale cannot speak unless someone writes down what it says. He nods. Then he tells you that one of the empty carts returning later should be weighed before the lunch bell. That way, at least one old Tare can be tested before the day becomes crowded again. This is the next small turn. The scale house is no longer simply receiving figures. It is beginning to make them answer one another. The coal cart arrives for a bakery before the empty flour cart can return. The coal is dusty and dull black, held in sacks that leave marks on the boards. Lisbon's bakeries burn fuel steadily, and a missed delivery can change the rhythm of bread before dawn. You record the merchant, you record the buyer, you record the load as coal for ovens. The weigher reads the gross. The Tare slip is fresh, but the sacks are not. Some are patched. One is tied with a different cord. You note the sack count without being asked, because counts help weights become less lonely. The coal carter is patient. Coal men often are. In scale houses, dust teaches a person to move with care, because quick motion only puts more of the work into the air. You sand the ink, wait, then blow lightly across the page, away from the open bottle. A careless breath toward ink can carry grit where it does not belong. The ticket is stamped and released. A clean transaction can feel like a kindness. It reminds everyone that the office is not hunting for trouble. It is only keeping the day balanced. Then the empty flower cart returns, lighter in sound as it crosses the stones. Its iron tires sound thinner now, without the packed sacks pressing the wheels into the street. The carter guides it carefully, as if the empty cart has become more official than the full one had been. The weigher raises one hand, and the mule stops with its front hooves just before the iron plate. You look down at the flower ticket still waiting near your ink bottle, unfinished and a little accusing in its plainness. The gross figure is already written. The old Tare is already written. Only the truth of the empty cart remains to be placed beside them. The weigher steps around the platform, checking the line where iron meets stone. He does this with the calm habit of a man who has seen wheels sit half an inch too far to one side, and numbers follow them into error. The cart rolls forward. The boards groan, but lightly. The mule stands outside the plate, because only the cart is needed now. The shafts are lifted and steadied by the carter's hands, and the cart rests alone on the municipal scale. For a moment, everything seems to wait for the beam. The poise moves. The weigher bends close, one eye narrowed toward the mark. You watch him through the window, but you do not write yet. A number spoken too soon can settle in the mind before the scale has settled in metal. The beam rises a little, then it lowers. Then it finds its place. The weigher calls the weight, and it is not the same as the old ticket. It is heavier by enough to explain the morning's small unease. Not much, not a scandal. A repaired wheel, a newer spoke, perhaps a thicker iron rim, perhaps damp timber from last night's mist. But there it is. A cart has changed, while the paper pretending to know it has not. You take the pencil scrap and add the new empty weight beneath the earlier note. Then you open the ledger to the flower line and make the correction carefully, leaving the old figure still readable. You do not scrape it away. You do not drown it in ink. You draw a single line through the old tear, thin as a hair, and write the measured tear above it. The net weight changes. The fee changes with it. A small coin's difference appears where there had been only trust. The carter watches your hand more than your face. He is not a man trained in columns, but he understands subtraction when it reaches his pocket. You calculate again. Gross weight less the cart. The sacks remain what they were. The city's charge becomes a little different. You stamp the ticket only after the weigher has repeated the empty weight aloud. Then you ask the carter to carry the corrected slip with the cart until a fresh tear card can be made. He nods, folds the slip once, then thinks better of it and keeps it flat. Fresh ink deserves not to be rubbed. This is the first rechecked tear of the day. It is a small event, but the room notices. The office air feels changed in a way that cannot be heard from the street. The ledger has begun to correct not only what arrives, but what has been assumed. You place a tiny mark in the margin beside the flower entry, matching the mark near the olive oil barrels. 2 marks, 2 reminders, 2 places where the morning has asked to be remembered. The fish barrels come in close to noon, and they bring the river with them. They smell of salt, wet wood, rope, scales, and the cold shadow of storage sheds near the quay. The barrels are not elegant. They are practical things, stained by use, swollen in places, bound with hoops and marked in chalk that has already begun to blur. Fish is a difficult load for a scribe because it does not sit quietly in the imagination. Even sealed in barrels, it announces itself. The carter laughs softly when he sees you turn the ink bottle a little farther away. He has seen clerks do this before. Oil, flour, cork, coal, tiles, fish. The scale house does not choose what the city needs. It only writes each need into its column. The weigher calls the gross weight. You enter it. Then you ask whether the barrel tear is counted by number or weighed by batch. The carter says the barrels are standard. Standard is another gentle word that can hold too much inside it. You ask for the count. He says there are 12. You write 12 barrels in the remarks column, because numbers of objects can steady numbers of weight. The tear slip gives a per barrel figure, copied from a supplier's list. It may be true. It may have been true last year. It may have been true when the barrels were dry, empty and new. But now each barrel carries its own dampness, its own repair, its own history of salt and swelling. You do not halt the load. Fish cannot wait politely in a municipal queue while clerks search for certainty. You write the presented Tare, then add barrel Tare by standard list. Not verified today. The phrase is longer than the space allows. You shorten it with care, not by making it vague, but by making the letters lean closer together. The carter receives his ticket. He leaves with relief. Behind him, a boy sprinkles water near the doorway to settle dust, and the wet stone darkens in an uneven fan. The smell of coal softens. The smell of fish remains. The scale house is built for fairness, but it is also built inside a real morning. Goods spoil, animals tire, men lose patience, ink dries. The job is not to make the world perfect, it is to make the day traceable. That is a different kind of goodness. Near the lunch hour, the line thins, but does not vanish. A cart of firewood arrives for a bakery on a steep street. Then 2 empty hand carts come together, each needing a fresh Tare card for municipal market work. Then a broker's assistant brings a crate of metal fittings, not large, but dense enough to surprise the beam. You work through them one by one. Each entry has the same bones: name, cart, goods, gross, Tare, net, fee, time, remarks. The repetition has a plain music to it. The mind rests in the columns, even while the hand remains watchful. When the handcarts are weighed empty, their owners stand beside them with a certain pride. A handcart is smaller than a mule cart, but it is still a worker's instrument, and a correct Tare is like a clean handle. It means future loads can pass without argument. You make 2 new cards. The cardstock is pale brown, cut unevenly at the edges. With the municipal stamp pressed in purple ink, you write the card description as well as the number. One has a patched left handle. One has a bent front rim. These things matter because numbers alone can drift away from the objects they were meant to serve. You sand the ink and wait longer than usual. Tare cards are handled often. A smear on a card becomes a question later. The men tuck the cards into inner pockets and move on. The weigher comes inside for a short cup of coffee. He stands rather than sits because his coat is dusty and damp at the hem. The room is too small for ceremony. He leans against the wall near the ticket spike and rubs his thumb along the edge of the cup. His face is lined by outdoor work. The sun, the river air, iron dust, and the old habit of squinting at the beam have written their own ledger there. He asks how many marks you have now. You look at the scrap: olive oil, flour cart, ceramic crates, fish barrels, 2 hand carts newly set down. The list is no longer merely a scratch note. It has columns of its own, faint and grey. You tell him it is only for keeping track until the entries are settled. He gives a soft sound, not quite a laugh. Keeping track is what a scale house says when it is beginning to investigate itself. But he does not mock you. He understands the comfort of a well-kept instrument. He has oiled the pivots on cold mornings, cleared grit from the platform edge, and learned that a scale tells the truth only when tended. A ledger is much the same. It balances only if someone tends the small places where habit rubs against fact. The olive oil cart is still waiting near the wall. The horse has been watered. The carter has eaten bread from a cloth and a small piece of cheese, sitting on the low curb beside the wheel. His impatience has softened into something like resignation. He knows the office has not forgotten him. That may be better or worse, depending on the merchant he serves. You call him back to the window and ask for any second paper from the warehouse. He searches inside his jacket and produces a smaller slip, folded twice and warm from his pocket. This one is not a dock note. It is a loading tally. The barrel count matches, the merchant initials match, but the total weight written there is closer to the municipal platform reading than to the dock note first presented. The difference opens quietly, like a drawer. You do not say so at once. You place the loading tally beside the dock note, and the 2 papers disagree without needing voices. The carter looks at them, then looks away. He says the larger figure was given at the river warehouse. He says he only carries what he is handed. The statement is probably true. A carter's work is movement, not arithmetic. He can be responsible for the road, the animal, the ropes, and the safe arrival of goods. without knowing which clerk wrote which figure before dawn. You ask whether any barrel was removed after the dock note. He says no. He says the load was sealed before he took it. The weigher listens from the doorway, cup still in hand. He asks whether the barrels were full to the same mark. The carter shrugs. A barrel can be closed before a carrier sees what is inside. There are limits to what each worker can know. That is one reason paper exists. That is also one reason paper can fail. You make a fuller note on the pencil scrap. Dock note higher than loading tally and platform reading. Ticket held. Carter not at fault by statement. The last phrase is not legal language. It is human language. You write it because ledgers can become cold if they contain only numbers. Then you copy the loading tally figure into the remarks column in abbreviated form, with a reference mark leading back to the held papers. The official ledger does not have room for everything. The day is already bigger than its columns. At midday, the wall clock gives a low strike, softened by dust inside the case. The sound moves through the room and out through the open window, where it mingles with hooves, wheel rims, street voices, and the gulls turning over the river. The lunch pause is not complete. A municipal scale house near the waterfront does not sleep while the city moves goods. But there is a thinning. Men step into shade. Animals lower their heads. The weigher closes the platform gate halfway, not shut, only resting. You take the bread wrapped in paper from your drawer. It has absorbed the scent of ink and wood shavings from the desk. There is a little sausage, dark and firm, and an orange with a peel that gives a bright smell to the room. You eat slowly, keeping one hand clean enough for paper. A scribe learns to separate fingers. The thumb and first finger hold food. The last two remain for lifting a page edge, touching a ticket corner, moving the blotting sand. It is not formal training. It is what the work teaches the body. The pencil scrap lies beside your cup. Even at rest, it draws the eye. It is not beautiful. It has smudged lines, pressed writing, hurried abbreviations, and a flowery thumbprint from the carter's old slip. But it holds the shape of the morning better than the ledger alone. The ledger is official. The scrap is alive. That is the difference. The ledger says what must be preserved. The scrap says what had to be noticed before preservation was possible. A shadow falls across the doorway just after the hour. Not the shadow of a carter. Not the weigher. A man in a municipal coat steps inside, carrying a sealed packet beneath one arm. His hat is brushed clean, and his shoes show street dust only at the edges. He is not grand. Lisbon's municipal offices were full of men like this. Clerks and inspectors moving between counters, yards, depots, and storerooms. They carried papers that changed the behavior of rooms. He gives his name to the senior clerk's desk, though the senior clerk is not yet present. Then he looks at you, because you are the person sitting before the open book. You rise, not quickly, and wipe your fingers on a cloth before touching any official paper. The inspector sets the packet down. The seal bears the municipal mark, pressed in red wax that has cracked slightly in transit. He says the new register is to begin today, not tomorrow, not at the first of next month, today. His tone is not harsh. It is the tone of an instruction already decided elsewhere. Lisbon in the 1920s was a city of older habits and newer systems, with offices trying to make daily work more uniform. Forms were being tightened. Receipts were being numbered. Fees were being traced more carefully from street to treasury. A scale house might look simple from outside, but its tickets touched revenue, trade, and public trust. A sack weighed incorrectly could mean a wrong fee. A barrel recorded loosely could mean a merchant paid too little, or a buyer paid too much. The inspector does not explain all this at length. He does not need to. The sealed packet explains enough. He breaks the wax. Inside is a bound official register, smaller than the old ledger but stricter in its design. The pages are numbered. The columns are printed. There are no generous margins. There are no casual blank spaces where a scribe might hide uncertainty until later. Each line has a place for date, ticket number, owner, commodity, gross weight, tare, net weight, fee, and certification. The remarks column is there, but narrow. Narrower even than the old one. You run your eyes along the printed headings. They feel clean and unforgiving. The inspector also removes a stack of new tickets with serial numbers printed in red. Each ticket has a matching stub. The stub remains in the book. The ticket leaves with the carter. The old system allowed memory to live in several places. A note, a pocket slip, a ledger line, a stamped ticket. The new system wants one chain. Ticket to stub, stub to register, register to account, account to office. There is comfort in such order. There is also less room for the kind of morning you have just had. The inspector asks whether any tickets from today remain unsettled. You look down at the desk. The olive oil papers are still there. The flour correction is fresh. The ceramic crates are noted for later verification. The fish barrel Tare has been accepted but marked. You answer honestly. Several are pending. The inspector's eyes move to the open ledger, then to the pencil scrap, then back to you. He does not reach for the scrap. That restraint matters. Pencil scraps are often treated as if they are not real until someone needs them. He asks for the first unsettled ticket. You place the olive oil dock note, the loading tally, and the held municipal ticket in front of him. The three papers lie like three witnesses who have not agreed on what they saw. He reads slowly. His finger follows the figures. The higher dock note, the lower tally, the platform weight, the difference in your margin. You can hear the weigher outside moving a chain across the platform gate. No carts enter while the inspector reads. The room feels still but not dramatic, only attentive. The inspector asks whether the platform was checked after the discrepancy. You say yes. The weigher repeated the reading. The cart was properly placed. The load was unchanged while held. The inspector asks whether you released the ticket. You say no. He asks whether the merchant has been notified. You say no. Only the carter has been held for clarification. The inspector nods very slightly. Then he says the entry must be brought into the new register. The first page. The first line if it is the first pending official matter under the new form. This is the moment when a small morning difference becomes harder to forget. An old ledger margin can be missed. A held ticket can be resolved and filed without much trace. But a numbered register begins with a first entry, and first entries are looked at. They set the hand, the habit, the tone of the book. You touch the edge of the new register. The paper is smooth, whiter than the old ledger's pages, and it resists the fingertip. New paper always feels a little indifferent. It has not yet learned the room. The inspector tells you to copy the approved particulars. Merchant name, commodity, cart, dock reference, measured weight, correction if witnessed. The phrase, if witnessed, rests in the air. You look toward the weigher. He is standing outside the doorway now, cap in hand, as if the room has become more official than before. The inspector asks whether he will witness the platform reading. The weigher says he will. His voice is low. He has no wish to make himself larger than the fact. He only knows what the beam showed. You prepare the pen. A new register deserves clean ink, so you wipe the nib and test it on a scrap edge. The first stroke is thin. You dip again. The second is right. Then you write the date in the first column. You write the hour. You write the ticket number, transferring it from the old stamped ticket and cross-referencing the new serial stub. The act is simple, but it links two systems together. Old morning, new book. Held note, measured scale. You copy the merchant name exactly as written, including the small flourish at the end that may be part of the firm's style. Or only the clerk's vanity, you write olive oil barrels. You write the gross platform weight. Your hand pauses before the dock note figure. The inspector watches, but says nothing. The safe path would be to copy the dock note as submitted and let the difference be explained later in another office. That would make the first page cleaner. It would also make the book less true. You choose the less tidy line because the scale has already spoken twice. You write the measured platform weight in the proper column, with the dock note figure placed only in remarks. The pen moves slowly, and the fresh paper takes the ink without feathering. You add the word corrected in a small hand, followed by your initials. Then you leave a narrow space for the weigher's witness mark. The inspector does not praise you. He does not need to. He turns the register slightly toward the weigher, and the weigher steps inside with careful feet. His boots carry dust from the platform, and he seems aware of every grain. He takes the pen awkwardly, because his hand is made for levers more than signatures. Still, He writes his name beside the entry, plain and dark. The line is now witnessed. The first page has accepted its first irregularity. It sits there quietly, not ugly, not grand, only permanent. The inspector waits for the ink to settle before he speaks again. He says the held ticket may now be released with the corrected municipal weight. He says the merchant is to be notified through the ordinary office channel. Ordinary is a useful word in government rooms. It can make a difficult thing walk through the door without raising its voice. You prepare the new serial ticket and copy the same measured weight onto it. The old stamped ticket is marked cancelled and retained. The loading tally and dock note are clipped to the stub. The olive oil carter receives the corrected paper through the window. He reads the number once, though he may not fully follow the cross-reference. Then he folds it carefully and places it inside his jacket. His face loosens a little. For him, the waiting is over. For the book, the waiting has just begun. The olive oil cart pulls away from the wall and enters the street toward the merchant's storehouse. The barrels rock gently in their cradles. The horse steps slowly, glad to be moving again. You watch the cart only until it passes beyond the window frame. Then your eyes return to the register. There are still lines below the first one. Each blank line looks ready and slightly watchful. The inspector tells you that from this hour forward, no ticket is to be issued without a matching stub. No blank lines are to be left in the register. Corrections must be ruled once, initialed and witnessed when they affect weight or fee. No loose notes are to replace the official entry. Then he glances at your pencil scrap. He adds, in a softer tone, that loose notes may explain an entry if attached and identified. That small allowance matters. It gives your morning a narrow door into the official file. You smooth the scrap again, as if it were a page that had earned gentler handling. The inspector asks you to number the pending items in pencil, then copy each into the new register as it is settled. You begin with the flour cart, because that matter has already been reweighed. You transfer the corrected Tare, you transfer the revised net, you write that the empty cart was checked after wheel repair. The words almost fit. You make them fit by choosing smaller letters. The where witnesses that one too, because he read the empty cart himself. The fee changes by a small amount. You note the adjustment on the ticket stub. Small coins do not make large sound when they move across the counter, but they are still money. They are bread, oil, charcoal, tram fare, candle ends, shoe nails, and a cup of coffee before sunrise. A scale house scribe knows that a small number can be large in a small purse. The ceramic crates come next. They are not settled. You cannot invent certainty where none has been measured. So you copy the presented information into the register and mark the Tare as provisional. The inspector watches your choice. You do not write doubtful. You do not write false. You write provisional because it says the number is useful for the moment, but not finished. The word feels official enough to stand. It also leaves a gate open for later correction. The fish barrels are entered with a note that the standard barrel Tare was accepted for same-day delivery, with verification recommended. That phrase is too long for the narrow column. You write it across 2 lines in miniature. Careful not to touch the next entry. The inspector frowns at the cramped writing, but not at the meaning. Printed forms like short truths. Working rooms often require longer ones. Outside, the queue begins to gather again. The half-closed platform gate is opened. A cart carrying sacks of dried beans rolls forward, followed by a load of firewood, and then a wagon with crates of bottled mineral water. The day returns to motion, though now every motion has a stub, a line, and a witness waiting behind it. You feel the change in your wrist first. The new system requires more copying. The hand must travel from ticket to stub, from stub to register, from register to fee column, then back to the ticket before release. Nothing has become louder. Everything has become slightly more exact. The inspector remains for several entries, standing near the wall where he can see both desk and platform. He does not interfere with the weigher. He does not speak to the carters unless needed. He watches the method. A municipal office trusts people, but it also trusts procedure to remain when people change. That is what the new book is for, not because scribes are careless by nature, not because weighers are unreliable, but because memory kept only in a person's hand can leave with the person at the end of the day. A numbered page stays, A stub stays. A witness correction stays. Your pencil scrap, if attached, may stay too. The beans are simple, the sacks are dry, the tear slip is recent, and the cart number is clear. The beam settles without complaint. You enter the weight, subtract the tear, calculate the net, and write the fee. The ticket tears from the stub with a small, rough sound. You sand the register line, let it rest, and brush the grains aside. The firewood is less simple. Firewood is awkward because it is measured by volume in some transactions and by weight in others. A stacked cart may look full and still vary greatly with dryness, cut, and species. Pine, oak, olive, chestnut, and mixed scraps do not sit in the scale house as one thing, but the municipal fee asks for a number, so the beam gives one. The carter says the load is dry wood. The weigher touches a cut end and finds it cool but not wet. You record mixed firewood, gross measured, tear by current card. The card is only 3 days old. You accept it. The inspector's presence makes every acceptance feel like a small decision. You begin to understand that the scribe's job is not copying alone. It is deciding which figures are steady enough to carry forward. The crates of bottled water make the platform clink softly. Glass has its own sound, even when packed in straw. The crates bear a name from a spring outside the city. The merchant's assistant carries a list with the number of bottles, but the scale house needs weight. You write the gross. The tear is complicated by crate deposits. Some crates belong to the bottler. Some belong to the shop. Some are replaced before return. The assistant begins explaining too quickly. You lift one hand, not to silence him harshly, but to slow the water of words, one figure at a time. Crate count, crate ownership, tear card, previous empty crate weight, bottle count. You write the chain in the remarks, because later someone may ask why the fee was calculated as it was. The inspector steps closer. He notices that you describe the crates by count and ownership. Not only by weight, he says nothing, but his eyes remain on the line. A good ledger entry does not explain everything. It explains enough for a future clerk to reconstruct the choice. That is the quiet art. You are writing for people not yet in the room. You are writing for the senior clerk after supper. You are writing for the municipal accounts office at the end of the week. You are writing for a merchant who may come back angry tomorrow. You are writing, though you do not know it, for an archive box years later. The afternoon warms, then clouds. The light in the scale house changes from pale gold to a flatter grey. Lisbon's riverfront can alter quickly when weather crosses the Tagus. One moment, the air holds dust and sun on stone. The next, it carries a damp smell from water, rope, mud, and far rain. You notice it first in the paper. The new register pages begin to curl very slightly at the outer corners. The ticket stack feels softer beneath your fingertips. Ink dries more slowly when the air is damp. The weigher notices it in the platform. He steps outside between carts and looks toward the west. The sky over the river is not dark enough for alarm. It is only heavy enough to make wooden things remember they were trees. The inspector gathers the unused forms and ties them with string. He has seen enough to carry his report back. Before leaving, he gives the senior clerk's empty desk a brief look, then turns to you. He says the day's irregular entries are to be reconciled before closing. He says the new register must not begin with loose ends unlisted. He does not say every matter must be solved. He says every matter must be accounted for. That distinction is kind. It is also firm. You nod. Your hands are tired now, but the work has become clear. A problem does not always need an answer by dusk. It needs a place where it can be found again. The inspector leaves through the side door. His municipal coat passes from the room into the muted light. For a moment, the office feels larger after he goes. Then another cart rolls onto the platform, and the room fills again with weight. The afternoon queue is less patient than the morning queue. Men who arrive after midday often hope to finish before supper. Animals have worked since early hours. Goods have been loaded, unloaded, delayed, and argued over before reaching the scale. A scribe can feel the impatience through small actions. A ticket pushed too quickly through the window. A carter answering before the question is finished. A mule turning its head toward home. You keep your pace even. The hand cannot become quick simply because the street is restless. Quick handwriting breeds misread figures breed returns. Returns breed more waiting than patience ever did. A load of soap arrives, packed in wooden boxes. It smells faintly of lye, fat, and lavender. A load of onions follows, sharp and earthy under burlap. Then comes a cart of paper reams, wrapped against dampness, bound for a printing office. The paper load makes you think of other scribes, other clerks, other rooms where numbers are kept straight by lamplight. Not all writing is literature. Most writing is custody. It keeps track of what passed through hands. It says, this was here, this was measured, this was charged, this was received. The rain begins as a fine tapping on the window ledge. Not enough to stop work, just enough to darken the sill. The weigher pulls his collar up and covers the scale beam housing. The mechanical weighbridge outside is sturdy, but it is not beyond weather. Its platform is a large iron or timber plate set into the ground, connected by levers beneath to a beam and poise. When a cart stands on the plate, its weight presses down through hidden rods and knife edges. The force travels through the mechanism to the visible beam. There, the weigher moves a sliding weight until the beam balances. It is a simple idea, made reliable by many small surfaces staying clean. Mud at the platform edge can hold a wheel higher than it should. A stone caught under a plank can shift the load. Water can carry grit into places where metal ought to move freely. A wheel partly off the plate can make a true load give an untrue reading. The weigher knows these things without making a lecture of them. He knows them with his feet and hands. He keeps a broom near the gate, a scraper near the wall, and an oil rag inside a tin box. When rain comes, he works a little more slowly. He clears the plate edge before each cart. He watches the wheels. He waits for the beam to settle twice. You watch him through the wet window glass and adjust your own rhythm to his. The room smells of damp wool now. Your cuffs feel cooler. The blotting sand clumps faintly if left uncovered, so you close the tin between entries. The new register resists smearing, but only if you let each line rest. You hold each ticket by the dry edge. You let the ink sink fully before folding anything. A clerk's mistakes often come from touching too soon. The grain cart arrives in the rain. It is a broad cart with high sides, covered by canvas that is already darkened with water. The sacks underneath are wheat, according to the merchant's note. They come from storage, not directly from a field, and are bound for a miller who keeps accounts carefully. The carter is an older man with a grey beard and a jacket shiny at the elbows. He hands over his papers with fingers reddened by wet rope. You spread them on the desk. The cart number is clear. The Tare card is not old. At first glance, this should be an ordinary entry. The weigher guides the cart onto the platform. The horse steps forward reluctantly, feeling the slick boards. The weigher raises his hand. The carter stops. Rain gathers along the cart's side rail and drops steadily onto the iron edge. The beam moves. The weigher shifts the poise, leans in, and calls the gross weight. You write it in pencil first on the scratch pad beside the register. Since the afternoon's changes, you have begun to make a light temporary note before committing ink. It is not a second ledger. It is a breathing space. The weigher frowns. He asks the carter to roll back and come on again. The carter looks surprised, but obeys. The cart backs off the plate with wet creaks. It rolls forward once more. The weigher checks both rear wheels. He checks the front. He lets the horse stand square. Again the beam moves. Again the poise is set. The second weight is different. Not by much, but different enough. You do not write it in the register. You add the second figure beneath the first on the scratch pad. The weigher calls for a third setting. This time he asks the carter to pull a little farther forward, so the rear wheels sit more centered on the platform. The horse snorts. The rain grows stronger for a minute, striking the cart cover with a soft drumbeat. The beam balances again. The third figure differs from both earlier readings. The office becomes very quiet. Not silent, because rain never allows silence, but quiet in the human way, when people stop adding words. The carter says the load has not changed. The weigher says he knows. You look at the three pencil figures. They sit one below another, close enough to be related, too far apart to be ignored. The new register lies open, waiting for a clean line it cannot yet receive. The weigher steps around the platform slowly. He checks the wheels again. He crouches near the front corner, where the plate meets the stone surround. Rain runs from his cap brim. He pushes the scraper along the narrow seam and pulls out a strip of dark mud. The mud is thick, packed with straw, grit, and small stones. It must have been pressed there by earlier wheels. He scrapes again. More mud comes free. The platform edge rises slightly, as if relieved. He looks toward you through the rain. You understand at once that this may not belong only to the grain cart. If packed mud has been holding the plate at one edge, then some earlier weights may have been touched by it. Not all. Not perhaps enough to change much, but enough to make the day less certain. The weigher calls for the cart to remain still. He fetches the broom and begins clearing all four sides of the plate. The carter stands under the cart's side, trying to keep dry. The horse lowers its head and blinks rain from its lashes. Behind the grain cart, the queue begins to bend along the street. A man with empty barrels lifts his hands in question. Another carter calls out, asking how long. The weigher does not answer. He is scraping the scale. You rise from the desk and come to the doorway. You do not step onto the platform. Your shoes are not for that work, and the weigher does not need a clerk in his way. But you watch the clearing. The rain has made the hidden problem visible. Dry mud can sit like part of the street. Wet mud shines. Wet mud gives itself away. The weigher clears the near edge, then the far edge. He finds a packed ridge along the back corner where cartwheels often push dirt into the seam. Then he notices one plank near the platform lip moving under his boot. Not much. A small shift, enough that his face changes. He calls for the carter to back off again. The loaded grain cart leaves the platform. The weigher kneels, presses the loose plank with both hands and feels it give. Below the plank is the scale pit, shallow but dark, where levers and supports sit protected from ordinary traffic. A loose plank is not a broken scale. It is worse in a clerk's day. It is a question about readings already made. The weigher lifts the plank as far as it will go and finds mud wedged beneath one corner. The mud has dried, then softened again. It may have kept the plank from settling properly. It may have made a wheel sit a little proud. It may have made one load read differently depending on how the cart entered. The older grain carter watches, and his irritation fades. A man may argue with an office. It is harder to argue with mud under a plank. You return to the desk and draw a slow line beneath the last completed entry. In the remark space of the grain stub you write, "Readings vary, platform being cleared." You do not issue the ticket. You place the merchant papers under a brass weight. Then you open the earlier pages of the new register. The first lines of the new book are still fresh enough that the sand has not fully left them. You turn the page back with your fingertips held high, touching only the dry corner. The olive oil entry is there, with its witnessed correction, dark and still a little glossy in the downcast light. Below it, the flour cart entry shows the measured tear after the repaired wheel, and the small fee adjustment beside it. The ceramic crates sit farther down, marked provisional, waiting for an empty check that has not yet come. The fish barrels are entered with their standard tear, accepted for delivery, but not truly settled. Each line seemed careful when written. Now, with mud under a plank and 3 grain readings on the scratch pad, care feels like something that may need to be done again. You take the pencil scrap and draw a light bracket along the names that passed after the rain began. Then you stop. The mud may have been there before the rain. It may have been dry in the morning, hidden in the seam, holding the plate just enough to matter. That thought moves slowly through you, not sharply, but with weight. You look back to the old ledger, the one that held the morning before the inspector arrived. The page is crowded now with ruled lines, small corrections, and your narrow remarks. The old ledger feels softer than the new one, but it does not feel less responsible. The grain cart waits outside while you read your own handwriting. Olive oil, flour, cork, ceramic crates, coal, fish, firewood, hand carts, beans, soap, onions, paper. Each item passed across the platform, each one leaving behind a line, a fee, and sometimes a question. You cannot undo the day. You can only decide which parts of it must remain open. Outside, the weigher has lifted the loose plank enough to clear the packed mud beneath it. The sound of the scraper is slow and rough, metal against grit, then metal against wet wood. The rain falls harder for a little while, making the open window bead with water. You close the window halfway, leaving enough space to hear the weigher call when he is ready. The room darkens at once. The smell of damp paper becomes stronger. You move the register farther from the sill. A clerk learns that weather has many hands. It touches wood, metal, ink, string, leather, and the patience of men waiting in a queue. The senior clerk returns at last, taking off his wet hat in the doorway. He is older than you, with spectacles that fog in the damp room, and a careful way of folding his umbrella strap. He sees the open registers, the brass weight on the grained papers, and the list of pencil figures. He does not ask for the story all at once. He asks first whether the scale is damaged. You say the weigher has found packed mud and a loose plank, but no broken beam. The senior clerk nods, because that is better than some answers and worse than others. He steps to the window and watches the platform being cleared. For a moment, he is only another man in a small office, looking at rain. Then he turns back to the desk and asks which tickets have gone out since noon. You hand him the stubs. They are still tied in sequence, new red serial numbers marching through the damp afternoon. He unties them and begins laying them on the desk in order. The ticket stubs form a thin paper road from the olive oil correction to the grain that will not balance. You place beside them the old stamped tickets that had been retained, the loading tally, the dock note, the flour correction, and your pencil list. The senior clerk lifts the pencil list last. His expression changes only a little. He is not pleased by loose paper, but he is not blind to usefulness. He reads the short notes, then places the scrap flat in the center of the desk. He says, very quietly, that nothing with uncertain weight is to be completed until the platform is clear and tested. The words move through the room like a door being closed. Outside, several carters hear enough to understand that their waiting has become longer. A murmur rises in the street. It is not anger yet. It is the low sound of people adjusting the rest of their day around a delay. The senior clerk asks whether any loads already weighed are still nearby. You think carefully. The soap cart left toward the upper streets. The onions went toward the market. The paper reams may still be close, because rain slows paper more than most goods. The mineral water crates had not yet arrived before the rain began in earnest. The beans left with their ticket, and their cart was square on the platform, as far as anyone noticed. As far as anyone noticed. The phrase is humble and not fully comforting. The senior clerk tells you to mark the grain ticket pending verification and to place a temporary hold on any tickets not yet collected. Then he tells the weigher to test the platform empty after the pit is cleared. You write the instruction in the new register's remark space because spoken instructions do not last long enough. Platform cleared after variable readings. Empty test to be made before further final weights. The words are too many for the column. You write them small, almost like stitching. The weigher's broom sweeps wet mud into a shallow pile near the wall. It is ordinary mud, dark and fibrous, holding bits of straw, horsehair, coal dust, and the grey paste of street dirt. Nothing in it looks official. Yet, it has entered the accounts of a city. The weigher lowers the plank again, presses it, lifts it, and presses it once more. It sits flatter now. He checks the surrounding boards. He checks the iron edge. He calls for the platform to remain empty. The queue waits. Rainwater runs along the gutter in a thin brown line. The empty platform looks almost ceremonial in its cleared state. A square of wet iron and timber open to the sky. The weigher sets the beam for 0. The pointer trembles. He waits. You watch from the window, holding the pencil above the scratch pad. The pointer comes to rest slightly off its proper mark. Not far. Not enough that a passerby would care. Enough that the weigher's jaw tightens. He steps to the housing, adjusts nothing yet, and checks that the platform is fully free. He walks around it once more, slowly, heel to toe, looking for any place that touches when it should not. Then he returns and reads the empty error aloud. You write it down. An empty platform with a small error is a quiet rebuke. It says the day's numbers may have leaned without anyone seeing the lean. The senior clerk asks whether the error was present before clearing. The weigher says he cannot know. He can say only what the scale shows now. That is the honest limit of his work. You write that down too, in shorter form. Error present after clearing, prior condition unknown. The phrase looks cold, but it is better than pretending. The weigher fetches the standard test weights from the locked side cupboard. They are not the little brass weights from the desk, used for small counterscales and checking minor instruments. These are heavier iron weights, blackened by age, stamped with municipal marks, and handled with both hands. They have been used for years to test the scale's response. Each one carries a known weight, certified by another office in another room, perhaps another part of the city. The weigher and a laborer place them carefully on the platform, one by one. The rain strikes their dark surfaces and runs off in clear beads. The beam responds. The first test is close. The second is closer after a small adjustment. The third settles cleanly. The weigher does not smile, but his shoulders ease. A scale can forgive a day if you give it time. He resets the beam again and tests the empty platform. This time the pointer returns where it belongs. The senior clerk asks for the grain cart to be weighed again. The older carter moves with more care now. He guides the horse onto the wet stones and brings the cart squarely onto the plate. The weigher checks every wheel before touching the poise. The grain sacks sit heavy and patient beneath the dark canvas. Rain has wet the cover, but not enough time has passed for that to explain the earlier differences. The beam moves. The weigher waits longer than usual. He sets the poise, lifts his hand away, and lets the instrument speak without being touched. The final reading is called. It is close to one of the earlier figures, but not the same as all three. You write it on the scratch pad, then copy it into the register as the verified gross weight after clearing. The earlier figures remain in the remarks, abbreviated but visible. The senior clerk watches you write. He says the previous three readings should not be erased. You tell him you had not intended to erase them. His eyes soften briefly, because there are not many comforts in an irregular afternoon, but that is one of them. The grain ticket is completed with the verified figure. The older carter takes it with a nod, tired but accepting. He has lost time, and perhaps supper will be late, but his load now carries a number that can be defended. Behind him, the queue stirs forward, but the senior clerk raises his hand. Only urgent perishables and municipal deliveries are to be weighed before closing, he says. Other carts must return in the morning or wait for a pending note. The queue receives this like weather. Some men sigh. Some speak under their breath. One man with empty barrels asks whether an empty cart can be weighed quickly. The weigher looks at the platform, then at the sky, then at the senior clerk. The answer is no, unless the Tare is needed for a load already in question. A scale house has only so much daylight, even when the city wants more. You prepare pending slips for the merchants who must return. These slips are not full tickets. They are small statements saying that the cart appeared, the load was identified, and final weighing was deferred because the platform required verification. The language is plain. It has to protect the office without blaming the carter. You write the same sentence many times, changing only names, cart numbers, commodities, and time. Rain due, platform cleared. Return requested. Each slip is stamped with a temporary mark and kept with a matching note in the register. This is slower than weighing. Explaining delay often takes longer than the work that was delayed. The carters stand near the window, hats lowered, shoulders wet, receiving their slips one by one. Some fold them without reading. Some read every word. One man asks whether the municipality will pay for the wasted hour. The senior clerk answers, gently but not warmly, that no charge will be made for the deferred weighing. That is the allowance. Time itself remains outside the ledger. You hear the answer settle poorly, but settle. The mineral water crates are allowed through because glass and rain together are bad company in the street. Their cart rolls onto the now cleared platform, wheels centered, horse still. The crates clink softly, the sound brighter under the wet air. The weigher reads the gross after 2 checks. You enter the figure with a note that platform verification preceded the weighing. The crate tear remains its own little problem, but not today's main problem. You issue the ticket and tie the stub to the rest. Then a municipal coal delivery for a public building is weighed, because the order carries the city's own mark. The coal dust has turned to black paste on the cartboards. The weigher wipes the platform afterward. He moves more slowly now. His coat is soaked at the shoulders, and his hands are cold. You notice the stiffness when he signs the witness column. A signature made by cold fingers looks different from one made at noon. The clock moves past the usual closing hour. The wall behind it has grown dim. The senior clerk lights the gas lamp above the desk before the street lamps outside are fully lit. The flame appears first as a small blue tongue, then steadies into yellow. The room changes under it. Ink looks darker. The white pages turn cream. Wet coats shine. The brass weight on the desk glows softly at its edge. The platform outside is still visible, but only as a grey rectangle in rain. You draw a red line beneath the last final ticket of the day, not beneath the day itself. The day is not finished. It has only stopped receiving new weight. The senior clerk closes the platform gate. The sound is heavy and final, but the office remains awake. There are stubs to match, figures to add, pending slips to tie, corrections to witness, loose notes to identify before they are swallowed by the next morning. The weigher comes inside and removes his cap. Water drips from the brim onto the floorboards. He apologizes for the mud. The senior clerk tells him there is nothing to apologize for if the error is found and recorded. This is a kind answer. It is also an office answer. Fault matters less than trace. You bring a second chair to the desk. The weigher sits awkwardly, as if sitting in the scribe's room is not part of his proper place. The senior clerk takes the chair near the lamp. You sit before the register. The reconciliation begins. First, the serial stubs are counted. One, then the next, in order. None may be missing. A missing stub is a door left open. You touch each one with the dry end of the pen, not the nib. Olive oil corrected and released. Flour cart corrected and released. Ceramic crates provisional. Fish barrels accepted with verification recommended. Beans released. Firewood released. Soap released. Onions released. Paper reams released before heavy rain but noted for possible review. Grain verified after platform clearing. Mineral water released after platform test. Municipal coal released after platform test. Pending slips issued for empty barrels. 2 produce carts and a crate load of metal fittings that arrived too late. The senior clerk writes a small check mark beside each stub on a separate reconciliation sheet. His hand is slower than yours, but steady. He learned pen work before forms became crowded with printed boxes. His letters have space in them. They belong to an older rhythm of office. You take the old, stamped ticket from the olive oil entry and match it to the cancelled note. The word cancelled is ruled across it, not in anger, only to prevent reuse. You attach the dock note and loading tally with a pin. Pins are useful, but they rust. String is better for long storage. Still, the office uses pins for daily packets because string takes time. The senior clerk asks for string. Tonight is not an ordinary packet. You cut a length from the drawer and tie the olive oil papers together through the corner holes. The knot sits flat. It will not tear the paper when the file is opened again. Next comes the flour cart. The old Tare slip, the corrected Tare, and the revised fee must agree. You add the columns again. Gross less old Tare gave 1 net. Gross less measured Tare gives another. The difference in net changes the fee by a small coin. The senior clerk confirms the calculation with his own pencil. The weigher confirms the empty cart was measured. He signs beside the correction, this time indoors. His hand warmer, the ceramic crates remain unfinished. No empty crate has returned. The provisional note must carry overnight. The senior clerk does not like it, but there is no honest way to make a provisional thing final after dark. He tells you to write a reminder for morning delivery to the merchant's warehouse. You take a narrow slip and write, crate Tare verification requested, ceramic merchant, cart number, recorded, ticket provisional. You place it under the inkwell, where morning eyes will find it before new work covers the desk. The fish barrels are different. They have gone. By evening they may already be opened, sold, repacked, or washed out. The Tare may not be recoverable in the same form. The senior clerk taps the stub lightly. He says that accepted standard Tare must stand for today, but the barrel supplier should be asked for a current schedule. You write that too? The office cannot reweigh what commerce has already dispersed. It can only tighten the path for the next load. This is one of the quiet truths of such work. Accuracy is not only a correction after error, it is preparation before repetition. The grain ticket takes the longest. You have 3 preliminary readings, 1 verified reading, and 1 note about mud and a loose plank. The senior clerk asks the weigher to describe exactly where the mud was found. The weigher speaks slowly, as if placing each word on the platform: back corner near the lane side, packed seam along the plate edge, loose plank at the front lip, mud beneath the corner, softened by rain. He does not speculate beyond that. The senior clerk writes the description in his own notebook. Then he asks whether the morning olive oil cart stood near that same corner. You think back. The memory is visual but not complete. You see the dark barrels, the horse's head lowered, the carter turning on the boards. You remember the weigher checking both wheels. You cannot swear the rear wheel was away from the packed seam. You say so. The weigher says the olive oil cart had been rechecked, and the second reading matched the first. But he also says the platform had not been cleared in the manner done after the grain readings. The room holds that answer. It does not undo the olive oil correction. It makes it less lonely and more complicated. The platform may have been true in that moment, or the dock note may have been wrong, or both things may have been partly true. A scale house scribe is often asked to choose between numbers that look more certain than they are. Tonight, under the gas lamp, certainty has rough edges. The senior clerk decides that the olive oil corrected weight will stand because it was repeated before witnesses, but the file will mention the later platform clearing. You add the cross note, olive oil reading repeated before rain inspection, later platform mud found during grain weighing. No direct alteration made. The words are careful. They do not pull the first entry apart. They hold the matter together with thread, ink, and restraint. The senior clerk leans back, and the chair gives a small dry sound beneath him. The gas lamp trembles once, as if the room has breathed too close to the flame. Outside, rain has thinned to a mist, and the platform lies dark, empty, and newly swept. You can still smell the mud in the doorway. It is not strong, but it has entered the office, mixing with ink, damp wool, oilcloth, and the faint sharpness of the gas. The day has become paper now. The carts have mostly gone. The voices have left the street. What remains is the second part of the scribe's work, the part that no passerby sees. You take the column of fees and begin adding from the top. The figures are small, but they ask for care. One slip of the eye can move a fee from one line to another. One tired sum can make the morning look neater than it was. The senior clerk adds the same column on a separate sheet, because officers do not trust a single tired hand after dusk. You write slowly. He writes slowly. The weigher watches, not idle but outside his usual element. His work has already been done in the rain, with plank, broom, scraper, and beam. Now his part is witness. When you reach the flour correction, the fee difference must be shown twice. Once in the old amount, ruled through. Once in the corrected amount, written beside it. The senior clerk asks you to mark whether the overcharge or undercharge favors the office. You check the arithmetic. The repaired cart was heavier than its old Tare. That means the goods were lighter than first calculated. The fee should be less. The small adjustment favors the carter. You write, fee reduced after verified Tare. The phrase has a modest dignity. It says the scale house did not only protect the municipality, it protected the man at the window too. That is one reason weighing officers mattered. They were not grand courts. They did not make speeches. But they sat between people who needed numbers to be fair, and they gave those numbers a place to rest. The senior clerk reaches for the fee schedule, a folded sheet with rates printed in narrow type. The sheet is stained where many thumbs have held it at the same corner. You have nearly memorized it, but he still checks. Habit is useful. Verification is better. The municipal coal delivery is counted under a different line, because city departments often move money from one account to another rather than pay like a merchant. The distinction is dull. It is also real. A cart of coal can heat a public office, a schoolroom, a hospital kitchen, or a guardhouse. The weight must still be recorded even when the buyer and the authority share the same seal. You copy the coal line into the day's municipal column. The weigher signs one more time. His signature has become steadier. The warmth of the room has returned some movement to his fingers. The senior clerk reads aloud from the reconciliation sheet, but quietly, almost under his breath. Serial ticket 1 cancelled and retained. Serial ticket 2 released with correction. Serial Ticket 3, provisional. Serial Ticket 4, released under standard Tare. Each phrase is a little gate, opened and closed. You place the ticket stubs in order, align their edges, and tap them on the desk. The sound is soft. A stack of paper, squared at night, has a comfort that is hard to explain. It means the day has not escaped entirely. The pencil scrap is still beside the register. It looks rougher under gaslight. The graphite shines slightly where your hand pressed hard. The flowery thumbprint has darkened at the edge. The senior clerk looks at it again. He asks whether the scrap should be copied into the official register or tied to the day's papers as supporting note. This is not a small question. If you copy every detail into the register, the book becomes crowded and difficult. If you leave the scrap loose, the reason behind the corrections may drift. You consider the page. The new register already holds enough to prove the day was irregular. But it does not hold the rhythm of noticing. It does not show that the olive oil difference came before the flour tear, before the ceramic crates, before the rain, before the grain readings. It does not show how one small check made the next one visible. So you say the scrap should be attached, not instead of the register. Beside it, the senior clerk nods once. He takes a clean half-sheet and tells you to write a short cover note. You dip the pen. Your hand feels the day in its joints now. You write, pencil comparison list begun during morning weighing, used to track discrepancies in Tare and declared weights, attached to explain corrections and pending verifications. You pause, then you add the date, the scale house, and your initials. The senior clerk asks you to add his countersignature line. You leave the space. He signs with a slow, curved hand. Then the weigher signs below, because several notes depend on what he saw on the platform. The pencil scrap is no longer merely yours. It has become an office document. Not a large one, not a beautiful one. But it has crossed the threshold between memory and record. You thread string through the day's packet, old stamped ticket, new serial stubs, doc note, loading tally, flour tear slip, pencil comparison list, cover note, pending slips, platform clearing note. Each paper has a different size, a different cover, a different degree of dampness. Together they make a file too thick for an ordinary day. You tie the knot. Not too tight, because wet paper tears when it dries under strain. Not too loose, because loose packets scatter inside drawers. A scribe learns the proper firmness of a knot. It is a small knowledge, but it saves future trouble. The senior clerk takes the official register and reads the first page again. His eyes move down the entries. Olive oil corrected, flour tear verified. Ceramic crates provisional, fish barrels accepted by standard list. Platform irregularity discovered during grain weighing. Scale cleared and tested. Several tickets pending. He does not say the page is untidy. He does not say it is good. He says it will need explanation if inspected. You say the explanation is tied with the day's papers. He looks at you over the top of his spectacles. There is a little tired approval there, not warm enough to embarrass anyone. The weigher stands, stretches his hands, and asks whether the platform should be covered differently overnight. The senior clerk says the loose plank must be checked at first light. A carpenter may need to be called. Until then, no early weighing is to begin without an empty test. You write that instruction on a card. You place it beside the wall clock, where the morning key will be hung. The card reads, "Test empty platform before first cart." The sentence is short. It carries the weight of the whole day. The gas lamp hisses. The rain outside becomes finer. Somewhere beyond the office, a tram bell sounds along a wet street, and the note is softened by distance. Lisbon continues, though the scale house has paused. The river is still moving. Warehouses are still being locked. Bakers are still preparing for night work. Shopkeepers are counting coins. Carters are leading animals towards stables. With damp harness and tired shoulders, your ledger line is only one kind of labor among many. But tonight, it has held their weights in one place. The senior clerk closes the new register, but does not put it away yet. The cover is plain, dark, and stiff. A new book should look fresh at the end of its first day. This one already carries damp fingerprints near the corner, a slight swell in the pages, and an uneven first sheet. It has been made older by use. Perhaps that is fitting. A register that begins with a perfect page may be graceful. A register that begins with a correction may be wiser. You clean the pen, You wipe the nib with a cloth until the last black line fades. You cork the ink bottle. You cover the blotting sand. The small office acts of closing have their own sequence. Loose papers flat, tickets counted, weights returned, stamp wiped. Cash drawer checked, lamp lowered, but not yet out. The senior clerk takes the day's packet and places it in the locked drawer, not the ordinary tray. Tomorrow, it will be sent to the municipal office, or perhaps retained for the inspector's return. Tonight it rests in wood behind a brass lock that sticks slightly in damp weather. The weigher opens the door and looks once more at the platform. He does not step out. He only looks. The cleared plate reflects a faint yellow from the office lamp. Rainwater gathers along its seams where the mud had been. Tomorrow, those seams will be checked again. Tomorrow, a new line of carts will arrive as if today had not already filled a book. You understand something then, without needing to name it. A scale house does not move forward by solving one problem forever. It moves by repeating the same care tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. The senior clerk turns down the lamp. The room dims. The three of you leave together, not ceremonially, but because the day has kept you past the hour when people go separately. The door is locked. The platform remains behind you, square and dark in the mist. Morning returns with a pale sky, washed clean by the night's rain. The stones outside the scale house are damp, but not shining now. The air has the coolness that comes after weather when dust has settled, and every wooden surface holds a little memory of water. You arrive before the first cart. The key is cold. It resists once in the lock, then turns. Inside, the office smells closed. Ink, paper, damp wool from yesterday's coats, and the faint sourness of wet mud drying somewhere near the threshold. You open the window a hand's width. Fresh air enters slowly. The card by the wall clock is still where you placed it. Test empty platform before first cart. The words look plain in morning light. The weigher arrives with the carpenter not long after. The carpenter carries a short tool bag, a measuring stick, and the unhurried manner of a man who expects wood to have its own opinions. He kneels near the loose plank and presses it with his palm. The plank moves less than it did in the rain, but enough. The carpenter lifts it and studies the underside. There is dark staining where wet dirt had rested. The edge is worn, and one fastening has loosened. He says it can be made sound before the main queue if the office can give him a little time. Time is always the material no one has ordered enough of. Still, the senior clerk has left written permission to delay opening for platform repair. You show the note. The weigher nods, and the carpenter begins. The first carts gather outside the gate. A flower cart, a produce cart with greens under damp cloth, an empty wagon needing Tare. The men see the platform open, the plank lifted, and the carpenter at work. They mutter, but not as sharply as yesterday. Visible repair is easier to accept than invisible caution. The carpenter scrapes the seating, trims a swollen edge, resets the plank, and drives a new fastening with measured blows. The hammer does not ring loudly. It gives a dull, wood and iron sound, steady enough to become part of the morning. You sit at the desk and prepare the register. The first blank line for the new day waits beneath yesterday's red ruling. You write the date. You do not write any ticket yet. The scale must speak first. When the carpenter finishes, the weigher walks the platform edge. He steps on each corner. He brushes the seams. He opens the beam housing and checks the pointer. The empty platform returns to its mark. Then he brings out the iron test weights again. Not all of them, enough to prove the instrument is behaving. The beam responds cleanly. The weigher calls the results through the window, and you record them in the register before any commercial weight is taken. Empty platform tested. Plank reset. Test weights verified. The first entry of the morning is not a load. It is the scale accounting for itself. This is new. Yesterday, the scale house assumed its platform before it measured the city. Today, it measures the platform first. The change is small. It may last, or it may fade if people become hurried again. That is why you write it down. The first flower cart rolls on only after the test note is complete. Its Tare is current. Its sacks are dry. The reading is clean. You issue the ticket with relief so quiet that only your hand knows it. The line moves. Produce greens, empty wagon, small load of charcoal, A crate of lamp glass for a shop near the Baisha. Nothing dramatic happens, but everything is done with yesterday standing behind it. You now ask for Tare more carefully, not suspiciously, carefully. When a cart is old, you note the age. When a cart has been repaired, you ask where. When crates are reused, you ask whether their empty weight has been checked since the last season. Some men answer easily, some sigh. Some produce slips from pockets, hats, wrapped bundles, and the inner lining of jackets. Paper comes from every corner of working life. Soft, folded, stained, and believed. By mid-morning, the senior clerk arrives with a message from the municipal inspector. Certain carts and containers from yesterday are to return for reweighing where practical. The phrase "where practical" carries mercy and difficulty in equal measure. It means not everything can be recovered. It also means some things must be. The ceramic merchant is first on the list, then the supplier of standard fish barrels, then the paper ream cart if still in possession of the load or empty vehicle, then several carts whose old Tare cards appear more than a month old. The senior clerk gives you a fresh ruled notebook. It is not the main register, it is not a scrap. It is something between. He says the office will keep a Tare reference for local carts and recurring containers until instructed otherwise. He says it in an ordinary voice, but the room feels the change. The scale house will now keep a second memory. The main ledger records loads. The Tare register will record the things that carry loads. Cart frames, wagon bodies, hand carts, market baskets, crates, barrels, coal sacks where standard counts are used, fish casks if the supplier permits a schedule. You open the new notebook. The paper is cheaper than the official register, cream-colored and slightly rough. Its columns must be ruled by hand. You take the ruler from the drawer and sharpen a pencil with a small knife. The shavings curl onto the desk like pale brown ribbons. You mark the columns. Date, owner, cart or container description, identification number, verified empty weight, previous stated Tare, condition, witness, remarks. The headings are practical. They are not elegant. They are built from yesterday's trouble. The senior clerk watches as you draw the lines. He says the book must not become a place for gossip. Only measurable facts. You agree. A scribe may notice much more than he writes. The discipline is choosing what belongs. The ceramic merchant sends his assistant just before noon. He arrives with the same cart, empty now, and 3 of the wooden tile crates stacked inside one another. The cart looks larger without the load. Its boards are stained with clay dust, and bits of straw cling to the corners. The assistant seems less confident than yesterday. He has been told to cooperate, but he does not know how much time cooperation will take. You ask for the old Tare slip. He produces it. The paper is cracked at the fold. You place it beside the new Tare register. The weigher brings the empty cart onto the platform. First, cart only. The horse stands clear, the shaft supported by the assistant and a boy from the yard. The beam settles. The verified cart weight is heavier than the old slip by a modest amount. The assistant says the sideboards were replaced in winter. He says the old slip may have been copied from before that repair. His tone is apologetic but not fearful. You write the condition. Sideboards replaced, old Tare likely prior to repair. Then the crates are weighed. 1 crate. Then the set of 3. The empty crates are not all the same. One has thicker corner blocks. One has a newer bottom slat. One still holds dry clay dust in a seam. The differences are small. Small enough that a busy warehouse might call them equal. Large enough that, multiplied over a cartload, they alter a ticket. You record an average only after recording the individual weights. The senior clerk approves this with a nod. An average without its parts can hide too much. An average with its parts can be useful. The assistant asks whether yesterday's ceramic ticket will change. You check the numbers. It may, not greatly. But the provisional note now has enough evidence for correction. You recalculate the net weight. The tiles themselves were a little lighter than first entered. The municipal fee shifts by a small coin. The merchant will receive the adjustment through the office. You write the correction into the official register, cross-reference the Tare register, and have the weigher witness. The provisional line becomes final, but it carries the mark of how it became final. That is the new pattern. Not perfect knowledge at once. Traceable knowledge by steps. The assistant leaves with a fresh Tare card. You write the card in ink and let it dry fully. Cart with replaced sideboards. 3 crate types noted. Use verified crate schedule attached. He looks at the card as if it is more complicated than a card should be. Perhaps it is. But future mornings will be easier because this one has taken time. The fish barrel matter proves less neat. The supplier sends no barrels at first, only a clerk with a list. The list gives standard weights for empty barrels by size: small, medium, large, salted fish cask, oil fish barrel, rinse return barrel. Each number is printed or copied in a tidy column. It has the confidence of warehouse paper, but yesterday has made the office less willing to treat confidence as proof. The senior clerk asks whether sample barrels can be brought for weighing. The supplier's clerk says the barrels are in circulation. Some are at the quay, some are at shops, some are being washed, some are being repaired. A barrel's life does not wait in one room. It moves through salt, water, fish, cart, shop, return yard, and cooper's bench. The weigher suggests weighing a few as they pass instead of requiring all at once. This is practical. You open the Tare register and create a page for fish barrels with a note that entries will accumulate over several days. The first sample arrives in the afternoon, smelling strongly of brine though empty. The cooper who brings it has rolled it rather than carried it, because even empty barrels ask for respect. It comes to rest beside the platform with a wet wooden sound, and the smell of salt rises from its seams. The barrel is marked medium on the supplier's list, but the mark on the wood is only a chalk stroke and half a letter. You write the description before the weight, because description keeps a number from becoming lonely. Medium fish barrel, iron hoops, 1 new stave, brine smells strong, chalk mark unclear. The weigher lifts it with the cooper's help and sets it on the platform alone. It looks small after carts and wagons, almost modest on the wet boards. But tar work is made of modest things. The beam moves, settles, and gives a figure heavier than the printed schedule. Not by a great deal, enough to make the supplier's clerk look down at his list and press his lips together. The cooper says the barrel has been repaired recently. He taps the new stave with one knuckle. The sound is firmer there, less hollow than the older wood. You enter the measured empty weight in the Tare register, then copy the schedule weight in the next column. The difference sits between them, plain and calm. The senior clerk asks whether the repair is typical. The cooper shrugs, not carelessly, but with the realism of a man who knows returned barrels. Some split at the head, some loosen at the hoop, some come back dry and light, some come back swollen with salt water even when called empty. A barrel is not a printed line. It is wood, iron, use, repair, and weather. You write that in simpler office language. Condition affects tear, repairs to be noted when visible. The supplier's clerk asks whether every barrel must now be weighed. The senior clerk says no, not every barrel, not every day. But enough must be weighed that the standard list can be trusted or corrected. This is the tone of the week that follows, not accusation. Sampling, rechecking. Writing down what had once passed by habit. The first barrel receives a small paper tag tied through the hoop. Verified empty weight, date, scale, house, witness. The tag will not last long in brine and handling, but it will last long enough to reach the supplier's yard. The cooper rolls the barrel away carefully, as if it has become a little more official than before. After he leaves, the fish smell remains near the platform. It clings to the damp air and mixes with coal dust, old rope, and the faint sweetness of onions from a cart that passed earlier. You turn the Tare register page and see how little is written there yet. 1 barrel, 1 repaired cart, 3 tile crates, 2 hand carts. A few lines cannot steady a city, but they can begin. The paper ream cart returns late the next morning, not with its load, but with the empty vehicle and wrapping boards. The carter is careful because paper merchants are careful with complaints. He has a folded note from the printing office stating that the reams arrived dry and that the delay did not damage the goods. This note is not needed for weight. Still, you keep it with the file because it explains why no claim followed the rain. The cart itself has an old Tare card, brown at the edges. Its number is painted clearly, but the paint is fresher than the card. You ask when it was repainted. The carter says after the left side rail was replaced. There it is again, a change in wood carried under an old number. The weigher sets the empty cart on the platform. The shafts are held level. The wheels stand square. The beam settles quickly. The verified Tare is heavier than the old card, though not by enough to shame anyone. You write the new weight in the Tare register and add side rail replaced before repainting. Then you recalculate yesterday's paper load. Because the cart was heavier than stated, the net paper weight was a little less. The merchant's fee changes. The senior clerk signs the adjustment. The carter watches the process with the stillness of someone learning that a replaced board can travel into accounts. He says the merchant will want to know whether the office believes the earlier ticket was wrong. The senior clerk answers with care. The earlier ticket was made from the available Tare. The corrected Tare is now verified. The adjustment will be entered from the date of verification with reference to yesterday's weighed load. The carter nods. Though the sentence is longer than his need, he needs to know whether he will be blamed. He is not blamed. That is the human part. The official part still requires ink. You prepare a corrected notice, and the senior clerk reviews it before it leaves the window. The notice is plain. Cart Tare verified after repair, previous Tare superseded, fee adjusted accordingly. Superseded is a strong office word. It does not accuse the old card. It only says the new one now stands in its place. You write a fresh Tare card for the cart and let it dry under the brass weight. The old card is retained, not destroyed. Retained. Old errors are useful when tied to their corrections. They show how the office learned. By the third day, the Tare register has begun to change the sound of the scale house. There is still the creak of wheels, the clink of harness, and the slow voice of the weigher calling figures. But now there is also the frequent turning of a second book. You open it when a known cart arrives. You check the cart number against the description. You ask whether any repair has been made since the last weighing. Sometimes the answer is no, and the line proceeds as before. Sometimes the answer is a pause. A pause is often more useful than a denial. A carter will look towards the rear wheel, or he will touch the side rail, or he will remember that a plank was added after a load of stone cracked the bed. Then the cart leaves the main queue and waits for an empty check later in the day. This slows the office. It also steadies it. Men learn quickly what a scale house asks if it asks the same question every time. Has the cart changed since last Tare? Has the container changed since last Tare? Are the crates the same crates? Are the barrels dry, wet, repaired, or returned from salt? At first, the questions feel like interruptions. By the end of the week, some carters answer before you ask. No repair since Monday. Same crates as yesterday, new wheel on the right, needs Tare, barrels mixed, 2 repaired. The city begins to speak in terms the register can hold, not perfectly. The weigher becomes part of this new language too. He stops accepting a familiar cart by sight alone. He walks around it. He notes a fresh bolt, a new rim, a changed axle pin. He does not make a performance of it. He only bends, looks, and calls through the window. New iron on rear wheel. Check empty when possible. You write the note. The carter hears it. The number waits. There are innocent reasons for nearly every difference. This becomes the gentle reveal of the week. The first morning had felt like a thread pulled from a hidden knot. By Thursday, the knot is less secret than ordinary. Wet wood. Repaired wheels, substituted barrels, crates borrowed from a different warehouse, dried sacks that had lost the dampness assumed in an old Tare, new hoops on old casks, extra rope left on a cart after unloading stone, a removable sideboard forgotten during an empty weighing, a hand cart with its front rim replaced by thicker iron. None of these things is dramatic. Together, they explain why a scale house cannot live by memory alone. A cart is an object in time. So is a barrel. So is a crate. The Tare register becomes a way of admitting that quiet truth. The senior clerk insists that no entry be made from rumor. A carter may say the wheel was repaired. That may guide a check. But the verified weight must still come from the platform. You learn to separate statement from measurement. In the remarks column, you write, Carter reports repair. In the weight column, you write only what the scale has shown. This small discipline keeps the book clean. It also keeps the people in it treated fairly. A man's word is not dismissed. It is simply placed where words belong. The measured figure is placed where measured figures belong. The office becomes less confused when each thing has its own chair. On Friday, the olive oil merchant sends a clerk. He arrives after the morning rush, carrying the corrected ticket, the original docked note, and a face prepared for inconvenience. He is young, with careful cuffs and a ledger hand of his own. You recognize his writing on the dock note before he gives his name. The flourish at the end of the firm's name is his. He lays the papers on the counter and says the warehouse account does not match the municipal ticket. His tone is polite. Polite tones can carry many burdens. The senior clerk invites him inside because this is not a matter for the window. The clerk removes his hat and stands near the desk, looking at the new register's first page. You open the day packet from the locked drawer. The string knot has dried tight, and you loosen it with a knife tip. The papers unfold in order. Dock note, loading tally, cancelled ticket, corrected serial stub, your pencil comparison list, platform clearing note. The clerk studies them. He sees that the loading tally from his own warehouse was closer to the municipal weight than the dock note. He grows quieter. The senior clerk asks whether the dock note may have been copied from an expected shipment rather than the loaded barrels. The clerk's face changes by only a little. That is enough. He says there were 2 lots of oil in the warehouse that morning. One was complete, one was partly drawn. The larger figure may have belonged to the other lot. He does not say it proudly. He says it as a person recognizing a simple transposition after it has traveled too far. You write a memorandum. Merchant clerk states dock note likely copied from adjacent lot. Loading tally agrees more closely with municipal platform weight. The clerk asks whether the word error will appear. The senior clerk says the papers already show the discrepancy. The memorandum may say likely copying mistake if the clerk confirms it. The clerk confirms it. He signs. The olive oil matter softens. It does not vanish. The corrected first entry remains in the official register, but now it has an explanation attached. One less shadow in the margin. This is how many irregularities end. Not with punishment, with a tired clerk in a small room matching papers to what probably happened before breakfast. The young merchant clerk looks at your pencil list before leaving. He points to the flower cart note. He says, quietly, that their warehouse often accepts Tare cards without checking repairs. The senior clerk hears this. So do you. No one scolds him. Instead, the senior clerk gives him a copy of the new request. Recurring carts must have Tare renewed after repair, repainting, added boards or wheel changes. The wording is plain enough to travel. The clerk folds it into his ledger case. A procedure has left the scale house and entered a warehouse. That is a consequence. Small, but real. By the end of the week, the office has a rhythm for reweighing. Mornings remain for loaded carts because trade needs daylight and delivery hours. Late morning and early afternoon receive empty checks when carts have discharged their goods. The weigher calls them out of the side lane one at a time. Empty flower cart, market hand cart, tile crates, fish barrel sample, coal sacks by bundle, ottle crate set. You record each in the Tare register with the same calm hand. The work is dull in the way useful work is dull. No single line offers much pleasure. But after a page fills, the page itself feels steady. Cart number, owner, description, verified Tare, previous Tare, condition, witness. The repetition becomes a kind of fence around future confusion. The carters begin to understand which differences matter. A wet rope left coiled on a cart matters if it stays during the empty weighing. A removable plank matters if it is sometimes present and sometimes not. A wheel repair matters. Mud packed under a cart bed may matter. A painted number alone does not matter, unless the object under it has changed. You start asking that every Tare check be made in the condition most common during loading. If sideboards are used for grain, weigh with sideboards. If crates travel nested when empty but separate when loaded, record both arrangements. If sacks are counted by standard bundle, note whether they are dry. This takes time. It also prevents future arguments that no one has the strength for. The senior clerk approves a small shelf for Tare cards awaiting drying. Until then, cards had dried wherever there was space, under a brass weight, beside the inkwell, near the window when the air was kind. Now they rest in order, separated by old account slips so wet ink does not kiss the card above it. Even storage becomes part of accuracy. A smeared card can undo a careful weighing. You write the cards in darker ink than the register because cards live in pockets. They rub against cloth, tobacco tins, bread paper, and tools. They need to be legible after a week of weather. Each card receives the same warning in small script. Renew after repair or alteration. The phrase becomes familiar under your hand. Renew after repair or alteration. Renew after repair or alteration. By Friday afternoon, you can write it without thinking, which is useful and dangerous, so you slow down. Even repeated words deserve attention. The weigher changes too. He begins keeping a chalkboard near the platform gate. On it, he writes the names of empty checks waiting after delivery. The letters are large and temporary. Flour cart, return by noon. Bottle crates, return after unloading. Fish barrels, sample when empty. Ceramic cart, done. The chalkboard prevents small spoken promises from disappearing. It also gives the waiting men something to see. A visible list is kinder than a hidden memory. When a carter asks whether he has been forgotten, the weigher taps the board. Not sharply, just enough. There is your place. The chalk dust gathers at the board's lower edge and turns grey in damp weather. At day's end, the weigher wipes it clean with a rag. The Tare register keeps what the chalkboard cannot. That is another division of memory. Chalk for the day, ink for the future, pencil for things still becoming clear, string for keeping evidence together. A scale house is not only a platform and a beam. It is a set of ways to make brief events remain understandable. You would not have said it that way to a carter, but you feel it at the desk. Each tool has its time. The municipal inspector returns at the end of the week. This time he does not carry a sealed packet. He carries yesterday's report, folded once, and an umbrella with a worn handle. He examines the Tare register page by page. He runs one finger down the columns without touching the ink directly. His nail stops at the fish barrel entries. There are now 5. 2 medium, 1 small, 1 repaired salted fish cask, 1 large barrel, dry and newly hooped. The weights vary more than the supplier's standard list allowed. The inspector asks whether a corrected schedule has been requested. The senior clerk says yes. You show the outgoing note. The inspector nods and writes something in his report. Then he turns to the carts. Flour cart with repaired wheel, paper cart with replaced rail, ceramic cart with new sideboards, hand cart with bent rim, market wagon with removable boards. He sees that many differences are innocent. He also sees that the office had no central memory for them before. That is the larger finding. Not fraud. Not chaos. A missing place for small changes to live. The inspector asks who began the comparison list. The senior clerk looks toward you. You feel the room shift slightly. Not much. Only enough to remind you that a scribe is most visible when something has gone unevenly. You answer that the list began after the olive oil discrepancy, before the new register arrived. The inspector asks why it was not entered directly into the old ledger. You explain the old ledger had limited space, and the matters were not yet settled. He listens. Then he asks why the pencil list was preserved. You say it showed the order in which the discrepancies appeared. Without it, later corrections would look separate. With it, the office could see the pattern. The inspector writes again. He does not praise. He does not censure. His pen makes a small, dry sound over his paper. Finally, he says the Tare register is to continue for recurring local carts and standard containers. He says the main register must reference it whenever a Tare correction affects a fee. He says old Tare cards should be surrendered when new cards are issued, where possible. Where possible, again, the phrase saves the instruction from pretending the world is tidy. Some old cards are lost. Some are in pockets miles away. Some are held by merchants who dislike surrendering paper that once favored them. Some have been washed, torn, burned, or used to wrap a screw. Where possible is the hinge between rule and life. You write the instruction into the office procedure book. The procedure book is older than the new register. Its cover is soft at the corners, and several leaves have been added with glue. It contains things no printed form ever has room to teach. Where the spare keys are kept, which drawer sticks in wet weather, how to order replacement ticket books, which municipal office certifies test weights, how often to oil the beam pivots, and now how to keep Tare for carts that return. The inspector signs the procedure note. The senior clerk signs below. You copy the effective date. The week of reweighing becomes an office rule, not a grand reform. A page in a worn book. That is often how working life changes. The following Monday is clearer. Sunlight returns to the riverfront, and the platform dries at the edges. Dust begins to replace mud. The carters arrive with the cautious cheer of people hoping the troublesome week has passed. In some ways, it has. In other ways, it has become the new ordinary. The first carts move faster because their tares are now verified. The flour carter with the repaired wheel presents his fresh card proudly, keeping it flat between two pieces of thicker paper. You check the number, compare the register, and issue the ticket without delay. He smiles a little as he leaves. The card has saved him time. That is how rules earn acceptance. Not by being announced, by making a later morning easier. The ceramic assistant returns with tiles again. This time he brings a crate schedule listing 3 crate types: large corner block, standard slat, repaired bottom. The descriptions are clumsy but useful. You match them to the Tare register.